Hello guys, this is James, and today we have a very important topic. We will make a comparison among the method computed and watch. Because it's very easy to get confused of, how does the three works? And can it really one replace the other? Some question like that. So I create a file here named computed versus watch. First, I have created something already here. It's really derives from the example in the official website, but I changed it a little bit, can make a better comparison. First, let's analyze. Here is a div full name and full name. And we can see that we didn't really, in the data, we haven't defined any full name. Rather, in the computer, we define the full name, and it depends on the function. The function has two things. The first is we define a counter in the data. So the counter will plus plus. Why we define this counter? Because later we'll just show up the counters here. It means how many times this computed function full name has been called. Okay, so that's how the counter work. The second thing is the return. The return value depends on the first name and the last name, and we set it already in the initial value of it. It's someone first and last name. Okay, so also I think I have finished introducing the data. The data will only have first name, last name, and counter. And then that's the first line. And the second line, we have defined a button and there's a click event. If we click this, we will change the name. So change the first name. The name will be changed from Sam to John, right? The third one is the counter. So we will display counter, as I said, how many times we will run this function. The fourth one goes to the input. We want something to control the input. So we use the input box and a model to have this sort of double bind, as they say. And then, okay, that's it. Let's go to the page and then check what will happen. Okay, so now the full name is someone. And if we click, as we know that if we click, it will really call this function. And then the name will be changed to John. And now the counter is 1. Why the counter is 1? Because the full name has been calculated the first time by the initial value already. So the counter is 1. So it has entered the computed already once. All right. And then let's click on this. All right. The full name has been changed because in the function, we have assigned a new value to the full name, to the first name, to change to John. So the full name has changed to John 1. Meanwhile, counter equals to 2 means the computed full name, the function has been called once. Let's click it again. Well, if we click, obviously, call this change first name function in the method. If we want to see it more clearly, maybe we can define another counter here. So it can see that, okay, this function is really being called. Since it's really some common knowledge, I will really not define the another counter here. But every time we click it, actually, it's called this function. But see, it doesn't really, the counter of the computed still remains 2. It means that if the first name and last name doesn't change anything, then we will never call this function again. So that's the thing, very important, okay? And then we go to the input box. Because it's like a vmodel bind, every time we put something, it will really change the value of the last name because we bind it to the last name, right? And let's see what happened. Two things that I have to note. The first one is if we really change it here, full name, here it will be constantly changed. And the second thing is that the counter, every time I type something, it just add 1. The computed is like this. Every time we change this last name, the function will be called. Of course, the counter will be +1. And at the same time, the page will be rendered again based on the new value. So I think we can make some conclusion first about the computed value. So there is like a variables here really depends on other variables. When the other variables, the value will change, it will be called. If the value of the variables in the function will not be changed, it will never enter this function, so it will not be called this function. The method is, in contrast, it will be called when manually we invoke an event. It's not something reactive. If we click it, it will be called once. If we don't click, it will never be called again. So I think that's like the basic differences between computed and method. Okay, and also according to the official website, the computed also has set a cache already. It will really cache the value of full name. We have tested already. If this will remain the same, so it will not really be called again this function. What's the upside of it? If the function has a very super lengthy logic, we don't have to use method to right every time to call it. We put logic in the computed. In case any of the values inside changed, the function will be called again, and then full name will be rendered again in the page. Otherwise, it will not really call these very complicated functions here. So that's benefit. Before we jump to the watch, we have to know something. And if we read the source code, we can see that in our case, define the full name functions in the computed is equivalent to define a full name as object. Then we can set the function as the get of the full name object. So let's modify and see the result. But we will really dive into source code maybe in another chapter. Now we just see that if everything remains the same in our browser, click John twice, everything works the same. So partially it has verified that. To have this function is to set the get property of this one. All right. And of course, the other thing we can really do is we can also have a set function. So it's really, we can assign the new value to the full name. It will invoke the set function. All right, I have write something set, a very simple set here. We just want to try to see if it really goes in the function to call the function. So I just set full name, and then it also can pass a parameters. That's the set value of it. Okay, and here I just modify the change first name a little bit. So when we click the button here, rather than it will give a new value to the first name, we will give a new value to the full name, and to say that, just to say that if the set function is called or not. Okay, let's just come here and click. See, it's really console log the set full name. So it means, again, I repeat, whenever we read the value of full name, it's just to invoke the get function in the computed. If we want to assign a new value to the full name, it will just invoke the set function in the computed. Let's jump to the watch. It's quite simple. Here we just display two lines. We can do it together with this. Please input age is the input box here, and then it will really receive the age value. We put it here, and then it also displays something. The age of something is, I have to refresh. Now the basic information is nothing here yet. How to get its values? Then we really have a age in the watch. We watch the value of age. If it really changed the value, then the list.basic information will get its value. So let's just try it. Please input your age. I put 12. Then, okay, it should already corresponding to what we have put here. The age of someone is 12. Of course, if we really want to change the full name, it also will change here. Let's see. John, and then we just John Mayer, and then we give it see, it has changed already. So that's like the full logic of watch. And what's the difference between the watch and computed? Watch is really exactly to monitor one Watch is exactly to monitor one property, that is age. And if the value of age has changed, we already call or we already have other actions. Depends on the change of a property, other things you will do. So it's according to official website, they give the example of asynchronous one. So it's really very handy to use it if we have a lot of logic. Even there's some asynchronous logic put here. So everything depends on the change of a value. Then we'll put everything here. In another aspect, that's something I want to add, because this some action is based on the change of a value. Also, like in the computed in the set, if here also, right, we use some logic, I will not write it, but I will just explain it. If set a new value like to the full name to the age, then we will really call a lot of actions inside this function. In my opinion, there can be some similarities when it comes to the usage of get in computed and watch. Okay, let's think about watch is, let's say, if we, this is some tiny details we have to discover. The first time to render, it doesn't really render any information here, right? So here we can see that as opposed to computed, it will really rendered once, right, we want to read the value. Watch, it will not, the first time it will not be rendered. Until the value has changed, it will be called. What if our logic is that even at the first time we want the things to be rendered, right? Taking account of the initial value, then we have to really change it a little bit. There's something already, if we change the age to a object, and here we just define a handler. And then we should set another property immediate. Let's see, initial value already. So that's the little trick. First, make the age a object and change the function to handler, and then we add a immediate to. So it will be immediately rendered the page. All right, another point is deep watch. So what is deep watch? Here, we change something. Rather than we just use the age to bind to the V model, we really now make an age to object, and then we just bind the number in the age, okay? That's the first thing. And still here in the watch, we still listen to watch. The other thing we have to change is that output of basic information based on the age dot number. So that's what we put here. Let's see what's in this page. Okay, it's all, because we set an immediate, so it has some output already. But if we put age here, let's say, nothing happened. Why? Because by default, view only listen to the first tier, or it's just listen until the age. And if something inside it changes, it will really not be captured. It will provide us a solution already. We should use deep. That's something like true. So now let's try to include something here. So that's something about deep watch. If we want to watch something deep, we have to add this deep watch here. But also it's a way to consume a lot of resources, because it will have an iteration over all the sub key of age. Now we just have one, but if we have a lot, right, it will have an iteration there. Rather than doing something like this, the best way we can do is to have age dot number, and this one just new value. So it will just the watch the only key. So it will not have so much consumption of our resources there. All right, that's all about the comparisons, and let's have a summary. Method is something we normally use. We like to use method when we evoke an event, then we call the function in the method, then boom, the function will be invoked. But method is not reactive. Without any involvement of the data or the props we defined in view, calling the functions in the method cannot really render the page again. But when it comes to computed, we have really to think it just like a getter. Every time when we read the value, in our case full name, we might evoke the function in the computed. I use might because it should be under one circumstance. Only the value of other depending variables changed, this get function can be called. And don't forget that it also have a set function there. And when it comes to watch, the logic is that the change of the value defined in watch can lead to different actions, so it will be very convenient for us to define a set of actions after the moment the watch the value has been changed. So it is enough to define some asynchronous functions we fetch the data from the servers in the watch function, right? So based on the characteristics of the set of computed and the watch, my opinion is that they have some similarities. I mean the similarities not in the source code of course, but in the application layer. And the next thing we have to know that compared to computed, the watch function will not be called the first time the page is rendered on in the browser, but only when the value of it changed. The function will be invoked the first time. To alter this behavior, what we're gonna do is to add a handler and add an immediate. The last thing we should know is that the watch cannot, by default, watch something like an object in the object so deep. If we want to set it have a deep watch, we should add a deep chew, but it consume a lot of resources. Alright, let's call it the end to this summary. Alright, I'm already starting to read the source code of Vue, so maybe I will give a lot of explanation based on the source code. So thanks for watching. I will see you the next.